Welcome, everyone, and welcome to this opportunity for Fireside Chat. We're talking with some really big brain people here that are going to give us some insights on AP Computer Science A on the free response questions. My name is Barry Lindler. I teach computer science at Dutch Fork High School in Irmo, South Carolina. I started teaching computer science A, I think, in '96. And in '97, I started teaching AB, and that's just how our program grew. I've had many good years, and many years I was thankful it was over, including last year. But I thought I'd go around the room. We have with us Judith, Mark, and Aaron, and get them to introduce themselves, tell you where they're from, maybe a brief history of what they're doing in CS, and then we'll come back around and start talking about free response questions. Judith, you want to start us off?
Alrighty, I'm Judy Hromcik, and I teach at the School for the Talented and Gifted in Dallas. This is my 9th year there. I taught 20 years in Arlington ISD at Arlington High School and did computer science there as well. I've taught a wide variety of computer science courses. Certainly, pre-AP, I've taught CSP, AP CSA, AB, also beyond AB to like a 4th year course that we're teaching now, where our students do independent study, but they also learn discrete math. I was on the development committee from 2001 to 5, and we kind of took everybody from C++ to Java, and I'm a consultant for College Board, and I just can't seem to get away from it.
Well, good. I'm glad you're involved. Like I mentioned to you before we started, I've read a lot of the stuff that you have posted. Actually, it commented back and forth, so it's good to actually see you face to face as close as we can get.
Yeah, it's nice to put the face to the name.
Absolutely. Great. Mark, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Mark Hampton. I'm actually only in my 4th or 5th year. I think this is my 5th year of CSA teaching. But it's been one of the things that actually drove me into teaching. I wanted to teach computer science, and unfortunately, there wasn't any easy teaching degrees for that, and an advisor told me, teach math. Everyone needs math teachers. You're going to be 1 in a million if you're a computer science teacher. So that's what I did. So it's taken me only 28 years to get to a spot where I can actually teach the thing I wanted to. But I did recently jump aboard the AP grading bandwagon, and it was a fantastic experience that really informed a lot of my instruction these past couple of years as well. So.
Great. Well,
I teach at Bradley Bourbonnais Community High School in the heart of Illinois. Midwestern, yep.
Great. And how many years have you been reading for College Board?
This will be my 3rd year coming up. So.
Great. Aaron, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Aaron Cadle. I'm currently in my 12th year teaching computer science in the state of Texas. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area at a large public high school. And came in, and Judy saw the train wreck that was about to happen when the school hired a teacher the week before school started, and said go at it. And so she brought me on board really fast, and so I've got to go to her AP readings, the AP Summer Institutes actually, and then I've been a reader for 3 years.
Wow, nice. It's good to have that connection. That would be a privilege to be able to learn from Judith. She's been an instrumental, especially in the, I think that's the first time I saw your name is the switch from C++ to Java.
Yeah, the fun years.
Yes, it was. And I have some questions about that later on coming up.
Okay.
All righty. Well, I thought what we'd talk about now is, I would imagine that our audience are AP CSA teachers. So I just thought we would just jump into FRQs, the free response questions. If one of you wouldn't mind, give us an overview of how they're broken down, those 4 questions, what those topics are. Give us a brief overview. That way, then we can talk more specifics about what you do with them, how you get your students ready, that sort of thing.
Sorry, a gnat just flew by me. Well, there's 4 questions, and they're each worth 9 points. And these days, when we grade them, those 9 points are 1 point, whole points, instead of a lot of half points like we used to give. Q1 is methods and control structures problem, which means there won't be any arrays, array lists, 2D arrays in there. They won't have to write a class. What they'll have to do is finish a method. They'll be given a method to complete. They may have 2 classes in there so that one class makes objects and calls methods from the other class. But typically its focus is on looping and on if else and method completion, knowing how to return if it's a return method, not to return if it's a void method, and being able to read the problem and use a little bit of abstraction. Q2 is write a class. And so that's the one where they'll say, write a class that does the following. It typically has calls to constructors and methods of that object that give kids really big clues on how to form the class to do the instance variables, the constructors, the method headers, and so on. And this one may include inheritance. We haven't really seen a big inheritance question. So a lot of us are just wondering if they're going to do it this year. I'm kind of hoping they wait till next year. It's been kind of a hard year. Q3 is the array list class. You could have both of those data structures in this problem, or free response. In this free response, you may just have one or the other, but will just be the single dimension array list. And then Q4's focus is the 2D array. And both the last 2 questions are about the algorithms that work on those type of data structures. Again, finishing methods, constructors. So that's the basic problems that we have. And this is different from before where we, had like 10 different types of problems and we say, well, I wonder what's going to be on the test this year. Now we know, and we know their order. So that's really good. That keeps us maybe from having the hardest question to be question number 2 and stopping the kids in their tracks so they don't proceed. So they really are kind of put now in order of easiest to hardest in general, which isn't to say that Q3 might not be harder than Q4, but you wouldn't really expect a Q1 or a Q2 to be harder than the 3 and the 4. And I think that gives kids, a better shot of finishing these and not getting scared somewhere in the middle.
I got you. I was wondering that same thing about inheritance and when it's going to rear its head. Last time we saw one was an interface question, right? I think like 17 or 18 or something like that. Right.
Well, some of them were weak interface questions. Some of them were more really testing the interface, like the menu. What was it called? The one with the menu, the menu, the items that you put in there. That was, yeah. That one you had to actually write the interface and you had to do some other stuff. Most of the ones that have interfaces in them, use them, don't really do anything more than use them, like Horse Barn. Horse Barn had an interface for horse.
That's right.
But we haven't really had a really solid, meaty inheritance question without interfaces for quite a while. So I expect one to come up soon. I'm just really hoping it wasn't this year.
Yeah, I would hope there was a little grace in those writings of this year's questions, not knowing where we're going to be and where people are.
I have no clue.
And with that, can we go around and talk about when we are going to be giving our AP test? Like in my school, we're in administration 3, so we're at June 5th. So in all digital, majority of my students will be taking them from home, but I do have about 4 or 5 that's going to come into the school to take it. Aaron, how about you? When and where are your school?
We are all 105 of us are taking it tomorrow by paper. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
We're also in person, going to take it tomorrow on paper.
Most of ours are taking in person, but we do have kids who are taking it in second administration, which is about 2 weeks, I guess, from now.
Okay, so you have some taking it tomorrow and then
most
some in 2 weeks? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our students got to opt for which one they were taking.
Oh, okay. Ours could not. They could opt for the location if it was digital, but our district got some input from the teachers and made the decision. But we have subjects in all 3 administrations, so it's an interesting time. All right, next thing I'd like to talk about is just how you prepare in your classroom for these FRQs. What are those little tricks? What do you do with the students or in the classroom? How do you get them ready for these FRQs?
Well, one of the things that One of the things I do is I start as early as possible, and I think I got that from whoever book I think I started using Leon Schramm's book my first year, and he got them going right off the bat. And once I came back from my reading experience, my first one, I totally understood why, and so I get them going right off the bat. First chapter, they're writing a free response, probably at least. When we were in person and able to do it on paper, I'd probably have them do 2 or 3 during the first chapter alone. It'd be really simple, just primitives and print commands and things like that. But I put together a little scoring rubric that tries to be reminiscent of what's on the AP and grade it accordingly. And I just keep doing that every chapter, just hammer them home.
Just little bits and pieces. Okay.
Yep.
Aaron, how about you?
Yeah, so I tend to wait until they have primitives and methods, and so I guess when I start kind of introducing classes about the third unit, the third unit of the year is when I start introducing free response questions. And on a normal year, every test you take will be some multiple choice questions, and then you have a free response question to answer. And then kind of I don't know if it's unique, but what I like to do is trade and grade. So what I'll end up doing is everyone in class will get a different student's free response question, and then I'll walk through kind of how did we pick apart the different points. And so I try to communicate to them, it's like an essay in English where we're looking for, did you communicate specific things? And so we'll come up with a solution, we'll look at the rubric and kind of point out the 9 points, and I'll have students grade someone else's free response question. So it's just another chance for them to be exposed to code or maybe to a different solution that they didn't think of. And then the students will get theirs back to make sure that whoever graded it kind of knew what they were doing. So then you can verify and make sure someone else, because there's always different levels of students. So it helps sometimes when a really weak student sees a strong answer, or someone who's really strong has to struggle through where are the points there. But I like them seeing other students' responses. And then as we get closer to the test, I'll have them kind of in a review section start to practice more. So before the test, they'll get 90 minutes and 4 free response problems and say, do your best.
Are you doing that now in person?
Yes. So that was their assignment on Monday.
Okay.
And so they have until Wednesday. At this point, I felt pretty confident that they kind of know the format. So I gave them, here's the 4 questions. I gave them the grading rubrics and said, time yourselves. Here's the rubric. Report back to me how you think you scored.
Okay.
So.
Good. All right, Judith, how about you?
Well, I take a little bit different tact. It's early and often, number one. So before we do like a college board style free response, we do a lot of code segments. On tests and everything, it isn't just multiple choice. But, you'll write this little section of code. You need to, there you go. My lights do that all the time. And so just sit there in the dark.
Yep.
So, I'll do that type of code writing. So they are always writing code. But once we really, so now with the methods and controls, you've got like frog or what's the other one? The calendar, right? Those are the 2 that we have that you can actually give them after you've taught them how to write the insides of a method, and of course, and do the looping and the ifs. So those are nice early ones that can be done, or something that's kind of based on those. And then the first one we used to give really for a test was AP line when they were writing a class. And I grade them. I don't let them grade them because it's part of a test grade. And so they get used to me scoring them based on the rubric. They get the rubric back, we go over it, and we do this all year long. I think I did 16 to 17 graded free responses with my kids. So and then I keep like a score sheet like we have at the reading, like the normal reading, not the online reading. of all of their scores so that I can see how they progressed and how they've gotten stronger and where their weaknesses are and everything else. And it helps me track that. I also go over the points with them, and I'm not adverse to having them grade them themselves, but I want them to have the accountability of me grading them to where they really know where I think they are at. So it's absolutely, I think it's crucial, number one, that we give them free responses as often as we can, and that we grade a fair amount of them. You don't have to grade them all, because we actually give the kids more. The free responses that I give my students are done in class, because a lot of them are released, so they can't go home and look up and give me the canonical solutions. So they have to be under my thumb. That was very challenging last year, given that they were all at home. You know, we had to have the talk that you're not impressing me if you're doing a copy and paste. You know, this isn't really going to affect your grade at all, but it'll affect what you get on the exam. You know, do your best, ask questions, make mistakes, and let me see what's going on so we can fix this. But yeah, free responses need to be done early and often. They need to be writing code, not just doing multiple choice.
Absolutely. So y'all, or when you're doing your writing and they're responding, are they responding on paper, or are they using an IDE to do that, to run things, or
on paper?
And Mark and Aaron, y'all are the same way, just pretty much all on paper or away from an IDE?
So I'll do a combination of both. So I do like, I do want them to get the paper experience, but I do like websites like Coding Bat, where they can practice this idea of, here is a problem written in English. How do I turn that into a code segment?
Well, that's a good point.
So for some of the repetition and speed things, I do like Coding Bat, because you generally tend to see some similar algorithms like, here's an array, count the number of times you see something, or find the biggest thing, or and so if they've been practicing those on like a Coding Bat, when it shows up on the free response question,
yes,
it's preloaded for them.
Yeah, we use Coding Bat, and I give programming tests, but free response is just a different category for me. They're getting College Board style free responses when I give them free responses, but they still have to prove themselves on a computer, because it still at some point has to run, right? There's no compiler on the paper. But so they're doing both. And it's not fun to just always write code, right? You need to, on paper, you got to run it and have the fun there too.
And I actually think that would be a fun thing to start seeing more in coding rooms, is those coding bats being available with built-in JUnit tests that we could share with each other, because the coding bats are starting to look a little bit long in the tooth as far as, but I love the coding bats too. And normally I would just have my kids write for any sort of tests or free response quizzes in class. They would all write code by hand. But this year our school asked us to try to minimize the paper handouts and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And since we were going in and out of remote and hybrid and in person, I was letting them do them at home, not on an IDE. They'd type it into a Google Doc. But I did run into so I had to recreate some of the AP questions with different words and titles, because then they couldn't just Google it and like, oh, I'm looking for the horse barn problems. Like, oh no, you're
that is the trick. Change the verbs and nouns.
Yes, exactly. So, and that's actually something that I would advise AP teachers to do, is to try your hand at rewriting a free response question from AP. Take it, and look at what's the kernel important part of this thing. What are they testing? How can I rewrite it into something that looks different, maybe sounds a little different, but is still testing the exact same content? And then practice rewriting the rubric yourself as a teacher, and that gives you a real good handle on what is AP looking for, because you have to study their rubric pretty intently and then figure out how you're going to write the rubric so that you can score it the same way they do.
That's a super idea.
It is.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
It's good to do multiple choice that way too. Start from something that is a good multiple choice question, and actually just clone it to be one of the other answers a lot of times too. Then you have a very, very good multiple choice question that is in the style of, you're finding out my tricks.
Well, hopefully our students won't be watching this.
Well, I mean, the answers still change. You're going to have to take it.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, and I'll leave the words the same, and I'll change some of the numbers or exactly what it's doing. So if they're not looking at it close, their solution is not even close. But bless their hearts. At least they're creative. But I was fortunate our district made the decision for us to do an admin 3 early on, or I guess when we first had the option. So mine have been doing, like you said, Mark, they're either doing it in a Google Doc or something like that. And we use coding rooms, but I have them do non-runnables just so they're used to that digital typing. And it's working fine for us. And you had mentioned those exercises. Just a side note, in coding rooms they have some AP CSA exercises. It's a small course they can give you, or you just request it for free and they'll put it in, and there are a bunch of tiny little exercises. I think we have a question in the chat, but Joe's going to get that to us in a second. What do you feel like?
The question in the chat is, your FRQs are definitely separate from labs. So someone wants to know if this idea of the free response questions are separate from your actual lab exercises.
Yes.
I like to give my free response questions as part of the test. So almost so they might have 20, depending on the test, 20 to 40 multiple choice questions, and then a free response to answer as well. And so, I do keep them separate.
And I use the labs as a fully runnable experience, so that there's output results that they got to get to, and the FRQs are typically not going to be runnable. As much as they try to, they'll still take them, copy and paste the code in. I'm like, good luck.
There would be a ton of scaffolding a lot of times in the FRQs to be able to make it runnable. I mean, if I ever want to give them that, then I'll probably go out to the Littman site or Stacey Armstrong's, who's already scaffolded like the old ones. But unless there's just a really good FRQ that turns into a really nice lab, they are just free responses, and they're either given to them as quizzes, like a major quiz in a class, or as part of a test, except when we get to April, when we do them every single day.
Yeah, we're just starting the every single day. Actually, I'm finishing up. We're using the Tukolsky book for review, and we're finishing that book tomorrow. And then we're getting into as many FRQs as we can do between now and the end of May. And I do the same as y'all. My tests are usually 18-ish multiple choice questions and 1 or 2 FRQs depending on the length, so that I can kind of balance them out point wise. But it's been interesting. It's really great advice about starting early. I started doing that many years ago, and I really feel the impact of teaching them how to read those questions. And Aaron, as you were talking about with CodingBat, I was using CodingBat too, and I kind of leaning back to what Judith said, I feel like for a while they were missing that dialogue piece. And so I saw what you did. They were learning to read those questions from CodingBat, get the answer, but then I had to somehow embellish to give more of that experience of, here's stuff you really don't even care about. You just need to get to this sample and this input output and that sort of thing.
Well, I think CodingBat drills in on a specific point or aspect, where the free responses are a little bit broader as well. I mean, they're testing a lot of concepts, but CodingBat really zeroes in on specific ones, and so we have to pull back and have a more full problem for them in the FRQs. If I can, back to what Mark was saying about Leon's stuff. Early on, of course, I've known Leon for a long time. One of the nice things he does with his little quizzes, I don't know if you grade them like he did, which they're like, I'm a little bit different than him. I'll do like a 50 if they just blow it. Otherwise, it's like a 60, 70, 80, or 90, or 100. I give a few more points in there. I think his was like 50, 70, or 100, something like that. But really quick ones that you can grade fast, again, that kind of like our CodingBat, that actually narrow in on a concept or two as you're teaching them. So this is more formative without a huge smack to their grade if they just don't have it yet. And they get them so often that if they have a couple of bad days, it really washes out. It doesn't matter. And those are very, very good too to lead up to doing full free responses, I think, because they get used to number one, reading very quickly what they need to do and practicing, and not just sitting there and staring at the page, putting something on the page.
Absolutely, and clarifying it. And that's what intrigued me about when Aaron said that about the swapping and grading. I've done it a little, but what I was hearing him say really kind of made the light bulb go off. That was really going to help them dig in and understand why you don't need to just throw the kitchen sink in there. You need to be very clear for those readers. And y'all correct me that this summer will be the first time I've ever read. I'm looking forward to it. So I'm just assuming that you really don't want to dig through a bunch of code that means nothing. You want them to kind of get to the point. But so I might do that coming up the next week or so and let them look at each other's work.
Oh, it's always a good thing. You learn from other people that way.
Yeah, like we've always said, that one of the reasons that teacher is the smartest one in the room is because they're always reading behind somebody, right? I mean, we're reading their mistakes and we're learning. So what do y'all think students do wrong the most? I know that's kind of a generic question, but what is that big thing that they're missing, whether it's a concept or a style or something with the writing?
What was the question again? What do they do wrong the most? Is that what?
Yes, and again, I know it's kind of open and vague, but if you had one or two things that make sure you don't do this or don't do that.
Yeah, let me try the sharing the room option or sharing my screen.
Okay.
All right, does that show up?
Yep.
All
Yeah.
right. So I would say this. They like to ask about constructors, and very frequently I see students like to reinstantiate an instance variable. So right there, they want to put array list integer inside the constructor.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
So I've just graded a few free response questions where that seemed like to be a common error. So I try and tell my students that constructors fill instance variables, so name equals, get that in there, and do not try and reinstantiate a local variable.
Is that always, is that an automatic deduction when they do stuff like that, or is it just sometimes a deduction?
Well, if they redeclare them, because
Yes,
then
ma'am.
it's local. But I will say that if they have a private instance variable as an array list, sorry, let me turn that off. Array list, or 2D array, and they're having to do the constructor, they do have to instantiate it before they can add a darn thing to it, right? They forget to do that all the time. They'll just start using it. And,
Yeah.
that's a null pointer exception. But kind of paired with that is redeclaring those variables. They'll take any instance variable, and instead of just like in a constructor assigning them their initial value like they're supposed to, the purpose of a constructor is to initialize your private instance variables. They will not just initialize, they will also redeclare. And that's a big no-no. I mean, that's for sure going to lose them a point, maybe two, depending on the rubric, on how they divide out those instance variables getting, initialized. So it's really, they have to be careful. If they're given a constructor and a free response, they have to make sure the constructor is doing its job, which is the variable equals some value. And when it's an array or array list or 2D array, and that didn't come through the parameter list, instead that's just an instance variable, in that constructor they need to instantiate it. So that's probably the number one thing that's missed on writing constructors that have arrays or array lists or 2D arrays, is that they don't instantiate it. And then the redeclaring is the other thing that goes hand in hand. There's been some years where kids redeclared everything and lost, 2 out of 4 points out of a constructor, and you just weep for them.
You do. And Mark, I'm going to just throw a devil's advocate question for you. How do you answer that question then when the student says, it's not fair to deduct that on paper because if I was at a computer, I would know it was wrong and I would have fixed it instantly. So how would you address that?
Well, some of the penalties, they wouldn't necessarily know they were wrong. Like if they for instance, if they redeclared an instance variable inside the constructor, Java happily goes along with it and does it for them, and they won't get a compiler error. But basically, I try to convince the kids that they're playing a game, and their opponents are the College Board, and College Board has a set of scores and rules that they're going to play the game by, and we have to learn how to beat College Board at their own game, and that means we look at what the rubric says and we pay attention to those things, and the next time we try not to make that mistake again. And some kids buy into it, some kids don't, and it just depends. But yeah, I pose it as these are the rules, and this is how you're going to earn those points. So
I like that. Aaron, do you have a different approach when your kids try to argue you down about how they write an answer and whether it's right or not?
So the most common thing I like to remind them is that there's more than one way to solve a problem. And so I'll let them kind of propose whatever their solution is. And if it works, great, let's take those points. If not, then we talk about what was wrong and why it was wrong. So I don't usually get the pushback of like, if it was another situation, it's more of, does this work instead? Well, let's think through that.
I got you. I use the rubber duck approach too. I'll say, argue with your rubber duck and see what answer you get back. If you don't get a good answer from the rubber duck, you're not going to get an answer from the College Board. So just do it.
Well, and the thing is, whenever they redeclare those instance variables, they do not find that error fast. I do, but they don't. So I've seen their debugging skills. Trust me, they don't find those errors fast unless the compiler comes up on it. And, as you said, that doesn't come up on that one.
Well, kind of a related question then. What would you say of the 4 types of FRQs that we talked about, what's the most successful? Which ones of those tend to score the highest points?
I think Q1 and to some extent Q2. Those are usually pretty high scoring ones. Although, loops will always be somewhat difficult. But they're meant to be that way. They're meant to show, early knowledge. Right? In the past, just the history of free responses, typically you would have 4 free responses and there wasn't a lot of early knowledge points in there. So kids who could write a class, could do the structure of a class just fine, got very few points for that and got smacked again and again and again for the logic they weren't quite ready to figure out. And so they're structured differently now to where like the Q2 and the Q1 are basically centering on things that were taught early in the course, and you're going to find most of your logic, harder logic, is going to be in Q3 and Q4 with the arrays, the array lists, and the 2D arrays.
So it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that the questions are, you're almost safe to say that they're in order of difficulty.
These days, yes.
Okay. And
I think 2016 kind of shocked people to their toes and really made them reevaluate on what was fair, in terms of, and I've always thought it was really kind of unreasonable to teach classes like we do and have classes and not give them points for actually being able to write a class, because as you all know, that's not the easiest thing to teach to kids.
It's not.
And we spend a whole lot of time on it, and they were getting very few points on free response for being able to actually form the structure of a class. And so now they're getting points for the early items as well as, the deeper logic that you're going to find in the array list, and the 2D array in the last 2 questions.
That's a really good point. And it's ironic. I feel like my group of students this year are going to have the easiest time. I never like to predict, but I feel really good about questions.
You never know.
I feel really good about their manipulation with 2Ds. Now, in my particular school, in most cases, I've had those kids already for at least 1 year, and sometimes 2. We start with computer programming 1, an honors level class, and then they can go to either one of the AP courses. The majority of mine go right into A, but some go through P first and then A. And then it's weird. We have a computer programming 2 honors. It's kind of our capstone. It's at the end. So that's why some people kind of skip the P part. So they've had experience, especially graphics, and we introduce arrays early, so 2D arrays are not a big deal. But what you said about classes, that to me, that just really hit home, because that is so hard for them sometimes, even though it's an easy points. And so I start off in September, October saying, when you get to that class question, you go ahead and say, hoorah, these are easy points. We know how to do this. And like Mark said, we're going to play that game.
Well, if they can't, I mean, honestly, if they can't write a class or use a class, they're in trouble on this test. I mean, because everything is, pretty much structured within a class.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and it's the abstract component of that is hard, and that's something that we have to work really hard to make concrete for these students. And so we should be testing that and giving points for having succeeded in learning classes.
Yes, those early years of those FRQs, oh my goodness, they drove me crazy, because you just never knew, and you just felt like, to me, I feel like I do a better job teaching now because I'm not teaching to the test, because I know what those questions are going to be, so I really can get in depth with the theory. Whereas before, I felt like I had to hit so much and just looking for free, easy points, and you just couldn't always go as in depth as you wanted. But that was just me. Let me switch gears with you real quick then. What do you think about Java as the delivery tool? Okay, so right now we're assessing computer science and the theory, and we're using Java as the delivery tool. Is that the appropriate tool? That's a good
question. Sure.
Yeah, I don't. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I don't have much of an opinion on it, because learning to code in Java was my intro to AP Computer Science. So when I took the AP Computer Science test, I took it in Pascal. So, I don't think it matters.
So did Aaron.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think it matters a whole lot what the language is per se. But since I haven't got a lot of experience with other languages, I'm not well versed in what the options would be.
Well, I mean, I still like, in terms of teaching, I like Java better than Python in terms of the AP exam. Python's still a little bit wild west.
That's a good way. I love that. That's awesome.
And it's a great language, and it's a fun language. I guess I like a strict typed language. I'm a strict typed language girl, and and I actually think that it does inheritance nicely after having done it in C++, and it's a safer language, and that it does keep you from getting yourself into trouble. C++ just kind of says, well, that's kind of stupid. I wouldn't do that, but go ahead, overwrite your memory. That's fine with me. And Java doesn't let you do that. So in that respect, I think it's not a bad language for a first year or a semester college course replacement. Do I think it might change in the future? I have no idea. I mean, certainly Python is gaining proponents, but whether or not I think that that's going to be a change that College Board makes, I don't know. It all depends on what they want to teach. I don't really care what the language is so much, as long as we teach computer science, which to me is the looping and the Boolean logic, the conditionals, the array list, 2D arrays. And there are some people who want to just get rid of the native arrays. I don't. I still think that's kind of important to understand. And not all languages have done away with them. So at some point, if you're going to study computer science, I think you need to know about arrays. So, I'm kind of meh, whatever. I've done the Pascal and the C++ and the Java, and dabbled in Fortran and Python and a lot of other little languages, assembly. Assembly never for students at high school on an AP exam, but I think I think Java actually is a good language for the test right now. I think there'd have to be a ton of work done to make Python the Python curriculum fit whatever the parameters are for the AP exam. I will tell you, College Board is constantly talking to colleges and seeing what they think is the best first course language, and even colleges that don't teach Java as a first course language teach it somewhere, and they're happy enough for us to teach it as their A course. So if that ever changes, we'll be changing languages again.
Yeah, I remember when the switch from C++ to Java, it was a couple of years before one of the big universities in my state, Clemson, switched. So the students were exempting their first course, which at Clemson was still C++. So they were going into the course they just tested out of. So some of my students were still taking it just to get exposure to it. And related to that, one of the messages from the chat was a teacher said that one of the students was asking, why is the test not in C++ or C#? But I kind of feel like, Judith, you kind of addressed that, is that the language, again, is just that delivery tool. It really doesn't matter, right?
I can tell you why it's not in C++, because classes are an add-on and it's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
C# is better. As to why they don't just do C#, it may very well be that C# just doesn't have a big presence in colleges as, that first year, second year course. I haven't noticed that it has. I see C++ or C as a first course, or Pascal, not Pascal, Java or Python. I don't know. I mean, I haven't pulled up all the course catalogs, but I haven't heard this roar from people that I know, their friends that teach college, that say, no, it should be C#.
Yeah.
C#'s a nice language.
That's a really good point. Also related to that then is object-oriented programming. Is that still important for us to teach? Thinking about how languages are moving now, is that?
That's a religious war.
Yeah.
It depends on who you talk to.
Please, no more wars, no more wars.
Yeah. I mean, some people say no. Even in Python, there's objects. I mean, you use them a lot, and you can certainly create your own objects in Python. I think objects are important. I think more is inheritance as useful as we thought it would be a better question. Because wrapping your data and the methods that work on that data up in an object is still really, really useful. As a girl who taught Pascal and took Pascal, having to send 17 parameters through a parameter list is just yucky, where instead you could pass one object that would maybe have all that state. So, and not even have to actually, and the method now becomes a part of the object. So I think objects are still fine. It's more the inheritance that I would question is a huge amount of time on inheritance worthwhile. And I think you see the test as really walked back on inheritance too. If you go from the very first year that we put the test out there in 2004 till now, inheritance has taken a back seat, and it's more classes, and not without inheritance, a little bit of inheritance.
It's definitely an elegant design, and in my fourth year class we debate all kind of things. In fact, this year, that fourth year class, we're doing Python. When we went on quarantine last year, I moved some classes to Python because I needed to be able to teach remotely on their Chromebooks, which is again how I found coding rooms, and it was successful. We have some really good theoretical debates, and one of the debates is exactly what you said. Is that inheritance really a key point? And is that what they're going to be doing in their career? So I like the way you said it was a religious war. So just going to kind of back out of that.
It can be.
All right. And think about this for a minute, because I just kind of told you my experience, but do you see any positives that came out of last year's shutdown in how you are teaching or delivering computer science education? Any positives?
No, I don't.
This is probably the wrong time of the year to ask that question.
I would say it allowed a few of my kids who do really brilliant other things. Like I have a student who competes nationally in horse riding stuff. And so some of the virtual stuff has allowed her to spend 2 months of this year out in Kentucky working with her horse.
Oh, that's cool.
But that's more of the exception than the rule.
So I think some of the positives are, like, when we have kids who miss long term for a variety of reasons. Some are health, some are like Aaron, that you have kids who have special circumstances where they have these incredible opportunities, and saying, no, you've got to be in school these 2 months instead of take that opportunity just doesn't quite seem right. Is that we can accommodate that. I've made so many videos between, last March and now. And I think that's helpful too for kids who don't process as fast as when you do it even in a live class in your classroom, when you're going over code and you're having them type with them. When they have a video where they can do the same thing and stop it and pause and look at and reflect, I think those are probably the positives, that we actually do have the technology and our own ability to do these type of supports for our students. We can Zoom with our kids if we need to, if we have, even clubs, we're Zooming on some of our clubs. So it's not how I want to teach in general, because it's a whole lot better when they're in class with me and we can have paper and pencil and manipulatives and all sorts of things. But it does mean that I can take care of kids who are absent. They can watch a class video, and they can keep up with us. So I think we have to take that positive with us into our teaching.
Absolutely. I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Erin said, and I'm sorry, I've got a new rescue dog and she's having a hard time, so I'm just going to hold her.
All right.
I go with what Erin said. I feel like I've made a better connection to many of my students in that virtual environment, and I think it's because we are literally face to face, even though we're not literally face to face. I'm actually staring at them instead of the back of their heads. I feel like I'm doing a little more interaction with what they're doing, and selfishly, it expanded my personal learning network. That's where I met Joe and how I started using other resources and reached out to community because I needed help when we shut down in March. I thought I knew it all, and then it exposed me to a lot more people that were bigger brain and helped me tremendously. So I think it made me a better teacher. I prefer teaching in person. But I know now we can flip the switch if we need to, and students are sick, they don't have to question it. They know I'm always running a Google Meet for us, and they can just pop on in.
And I like that part. I do. However, my students they don't have to show their face. So we see a lot of black boxes with white names. So that part I don't like. But there's quite a few of mine that actually do turn on their cameras so that I can see them and, they show you their dogs or whatever and tell you what's going on in their lives as we're coming into class. And, a lot of my job this year has also been emotional support. So, and I'm happy to do that because kind of we're all in the same leaky boat. So.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, is there, number one, thank you all so much for your time. It's been enjoyable for me, and I hope as other people watch it, they'll also enjoy it. But is there anything you would like to add or finish up with? A comment for teachers or students that are getting ready to take their exams? Or
do we have any questions? Did they come in, I guess?
Hey, we got one more question. Okay, this is a really good one. What are some of the best manipulatives that you use in teaching CSA?
Aaron's pointing. I use a lot. I make magnets for my whiteboards that stand for data, for classes, for all sorts of things, so that I can just kind of push them around and I don't have to rewrite them. And, early on, it's a variable, so you can, keep storing a value in the variable. It's a box with a name and a value on the inside. Later on, when it's a reference, it's got a name on the box, and the box actually holds the address of some object, and we show the object over here. So I do a lot of that. I have, let me show, where's one? Where's my bottle top array? It went away somewhere. But, oh, here we go. Hold on. I'm in my home office here. So I have a bottle top array so that when we start doing arrays, I give them a physical model of an array, and then I give them tag board that I've cut that fits into here so it doesn't smudge down and I can't get it out. Values that go in the array, and they have to turn it over, and then I say, okay, go through there and write down your algorithm for how you would find who's the largest or who's the smallest. And so they do the algorithms before we ever write code, and I threaten them, you cannot write code. Write down in English words what you're doing. I have not a manipulative, but a foldable for a class that defines, the parts of the class and describes them on the inside, and then we have code to tie to that, and we write other little notes on there. That has been really, really helpful for my students to learn how to write a class. I mean, the pop beads when we're doing stacks and queues in the other classes. Just anything I can get my hands on. Stories to help explain the data structure and help them remember, too many Daves for arrays is one of them. Anything I can do to help these kids make something very abstract concrete to where they can touch it and feel it. I'm always looking for other ways to help them understand, because if we just want them to think about it in their head and they don't have a real model of it, that they can touch, that they can draw, it's just very difficult. Not all of us have the ability to just keep all of that rolling around in our heads.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mark, how about you? Is there any manipulatives or favorites that you use?
I'd second the magnets and things that, I mean, my primary manipulative is a marker on the whiteboard or a pencil on paper, and getting them to draw things out as well. And but just tracking what's pointing at what and what's stored inside, and there's a lot of erasing and rewriting. But no, I don't have any great manipulatives yet. I've tried some different things, and almost always I either lose part of it, and I've never lost the markers because they just keep showing up some more. So I just keep going back to the tried and true.
Good. And Aaron, what were yours?
Yeah, no, I'm not a big I've moved. You say moved away. I don't use manipulatives as much as Judy does.
Yeah.
So.
And I did the same thing. My favorite set though is some Uno cards that I had in college. We won't talk about the beverage they were stained with, so I cleaned them all up. But I've been using them since the early 90s, and I just got a set of 10 of them and make sure they're all unique. And I use them for everything from talking about arrays to array list, and I have little index card pieces already cut out for I's and J's and R's and C's and max and mins and temps and whatever they might need. And so when we need it, I just pull them up to a table and they work it out. They do the algorithm like Judith was talking about first. I tell them if they can't explain it to me, they can't code it.
Absolutely.
So they have to use it. And it really works because I tell them, like, especially the swapping algorithm, they have to use one finger. So they figure out, okay, I've got to store it somewhere. And but I just keep those in a binder clip. In fact, I used them again today. That's my favorite set. It's just some old beat up Uno cards.
Well, and cards are great, like if you're doing like the binary search to show, okay, you look at the middle, which half is it in, and then if it's in the left half, you just take from the middle on and you pull it out and to the side, and there's one search, and this is what you have left. I mean, so they can see the binary search in action. Anytime you can make them do the algorithm rather than just give them the code and they understand it, and they're just going to learn it better. And having that physical model is just a big help in understanding that. Like some people can keep this all in their head, and it's just they got it. But a lot of us weren't born that way, right? And so we have to see it and touch it before we really get it. So that's why I do a lot of manipulatives. And as a result, I mean, I get a whole lot of girls to continue the course, and typical underrepresented students, because we've done everything that we can to actually make that abstract stuff concrete and get them comfortable. Eventually they're going to abstract it out and they're not going to need these things.
Absolutely. And you intrigued me when you talked about that foldable class design. I might reach out to you later and get some.
Oh yeah, sure. No problem.
That's fantastic.
M&Ms are good too. Teach passing parameters. M&Ms for teaching parameters or passing parameters are really good too.
Now you're making me hungry.
I know.
Well, y'all, again, thank you so very much. This was enjoyable for me. I've made a list of several things that I'm taking away from this. I'm going to go back and rewatch it. The fact that you give already of your time to your students and willing to give your time to other coworkers, that's admirable to you. So thank you and appreciate the input. All the luck on the exam with your students. I'm looking forward to seeing some early FRQs that will give us something else to work with. I never want to look at those 2016 FRQs again, or the ones from this year. I just don't want to see those ever again. But y'all do have a good night, and thank you again. Best of luck, and I'm sure we'll see you online somewhere.
All right, thanks. Have a nice
Yeah.
day.
Y'all. Y'all too.